In episode 6, there's a very interesting scene where the cops watching over Airi are speculating as to why and how she would be targeted by Satoru. The words are pretty damning. They think she was involved as an accomplice in the murder of Satoru's mother, and afterwards he tried to silence her. This speculation does several things. First, it leads into Airi's perspective, isolating her in the hospital against the unfounded accusations from her relatives and the police. Second, it leads to Sawada's appearance as a forward actor in the story. And the last one, which I think is the most important element, is that it frames the institutions of justice in the show in a very particular and eerily realistic lens. See, the police in Boku Dake ga Inai Machi, Erased onwards, aren't there to help Satoru, they're there to catch him. And it makes sense from their perspective. After all, he's a fugitive wanted for questioning. He murdered his mother. We have to catch him. And it's in that extrapolation of what happened that underlines a major fault that the show brings up. Erased is not only a mystery thriller with a tinge of human drama, but in the context of this video, it foregrounds a topic that's not really discussed in anime. What role do Japan's real-world institutions play in meting out justice? This question is admittedly vague, but we can find some very important and interesting interplays. Omitted from the anime are these soft introductions that detail Yashiro's ongoing rampage, expositing how he continues to kill, and more importantly, how he continues to get away with it. And despite the changing modus operandi, it seems strange that a serial killer like Yashiro could escalate to his wife and his father-in-law and the police not figure out exactly what is going on. But here's the thing, they probably could. The reason why extensive investigations don't happen when easier alternative explanations arise is because of the totality of punishment that's ingrained in the Japanese sense of justice. Justice is, as Tomoko Sasaki described in Nihon no Shiho Bunka, not something that can be bargained. And it's because of this cultural sentiment that at the time of the show's story, Japan, as Dr. David Johnson describes, forbids plea bargaining, immunity, undercover operations, and the presence of defense lawyers during interrogation. This funnels the incentive of the procuracy to seek convictions at alarmingly high rates, the highest of any of the OECD countries, and as a result reveals a twisted symbiotic relationship between the prosecutors and the police force. To be considered as successful wards of justice, prosecutors have to depend on the police for confessions, and the police as a result have little to fear from political bodies that are largely influenced by Japan's highly cohesive procuracy. And that's really terrifying. Erased shows specific comically villainized perspective of a malformed Japanese justice system that depends less on uncovering the truth and more on social harmony. For instance, Jun's death row sentence places him to hang, but remember that confessions are ultimately king in Japanese law. In that context, it's very likely the police have manufactured quote-unquote evidence of his confession. The only workaround to Jun's conviction is to have the police be the alibi. Another instance is in Satoru's escape. The odds of him being charged for his mother's murder are incredibly high. It's no surprise that his desire to run, while it may seem strange to us, is what makes sense in that context. What Erased builds is a world that, despite the fantastical elements that move its plot, is lined with surprising verisimilitude. It portrays the institutions of Japanese justice as inherently faulty, twisted, and untrustworthy. And I think that's a really notable omission from the anime that the manga tackles. Kenya wants to become a defense attorney but is a little uneasy about it because his father is one. In Japan, the role of the defense lawyer is innately deferential to the prosecutor, and fighting against the procuracy is seen in many circles as supporting the suspension of justice. The manga's insistence on Sawada's intercuts foregrounds his role as a reporter and writer, which is important because the media has been a huge actor in pushing for police and procuracy transparency and accountability in recent years. But what the anime and the manga converge on is the superhero rhetoric. The show and the manga constantly pulls back to the superhero mask, referencing Satoru's desire to do the right thing, the good thing. And interestingly, it's in this malformed justice system that Satoru is capable of doing the right thing, but there are some very notable caveats. Satoru's ability to change the past is itself a radically different, crazy, and unbelievable tool, implying that it isn't evolutionary or incremental shifts that will solve Japan's accountability issues, but radical ones. His dependency on his friends underlines the necessity of trust in conducting good justice. And if you've seen my One Punch Man short form, you'll remember that I stated that superheroes are agents that operate outside of normal institutions. They aren't beholden to the pre-existing power dynamics that are there. And the superhero motifs in Erased stress that action, proper, good action, may be something that can only be committed outside of the system. And if that's true, then Erased is constructing a highly cynical, pessimistic view of Japanese justice. But at the same time, it also isn't an inaccurate one. The Japanese justice system has only recently implemented lay trials, and even then, the changes in the conviction rates are minuscule. In fact, Japan has been on a slow rise in the number of executions with no noticeable shift anytime soon. There's a really weird story Airi tells Satoru about how her father was accused of stealing a candy bar and thus shamed out of society, and while it's a bit hokey, it does underline a central fault Sanbei seems to have with justice. The accuser is innately considered right, the defendant is innately considered wrong. Airi's story criticizes the lack of trust in the face of injustice. It also criticizes a twisted proverb in Japanese court, that the tried are presumed guilty until proven guilty. And her trust in Satoru's innocence is something the show wholeheartedly supports, but it also isolates her character. She's one of the very few that trust him implicitly. Later on, we find the value of presuming innocence until proven guilty in Airi's mother, who's already experienced the consequences of this guilty until proven guilty mantra. And what does she do? She helps Airi escape police surveillance and helps Sawada. It seems really illogical, but it is getting at a fairly straightforward message. Justice is personal, justice is dependent on trust, and justice can easily be perverted by those we believe committed to our best interests. It isn't uniform, suits, and institutions, but I don't think Sanbei really provides a clear solution to the issue. Erased is more interested and intent on navigating its mystery and human drama, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I just wanted to briefly touch upon this particular scary element that, while it seems like a pretty inconsistent narrative, is one that's surprisingly accurate and problematic.